Chapter 1. Waking Up. The potent drugs were wearing off. I knew where I was and why, but I was very disoriented. I could barely hold my head up, and I didn't want to talk too much because I knew I still sounded wasted. But my mind was processing, hyper-focused on the details around me. The light piercing through the blinds, the condensation on the water pitcher, the stitching on the sheets, and the soft knock on the door. The doctor entered the recovery room to give my wife the report. I suspected what he would say. The diagnosis would confirm his prior intuition, validating his 30 years of specialist experience. It would also permanently alter my life. The 12 months leading up to that pivotal day were tough. Discomfort, confusion, and fear, all symptoms that had been present for several years, had strengthened in both frequency and intensity. New ailments were manifesting without warning. I knew something was seriously wrong, but I couldn't believe that after all my hard work and discipline that I could still be this sick. I was too good to feel this bad. Most people had no idea that I was physically suffering because I just powered through it. Business as usual. I would see 40 patients each day at my dental practice, run multiple side businesses during lunch break and on my commute, and return home to my wife and children to eat dinner as a family and tell bedtime stories. My wife was the only person who knew how bad my condition had become. She also knew I had no plans to pull back. Slowing down wasn't a viable option. My businesses, commitments, and family were robust and still growing. They would likely be even bigger next year. None of these things could reasonably run without me. No other person could carry out all of my roles, not even temporarily. No one else on the planet knew how many accounts, investments, businesses, products, charities, and ongoing projects I had in place. So many people depended on me. This reality was not a surprise, just a natural byproduct of what I had built. I wasn't complaining about it. I knew that it was all part of the deal. During that year, I had seen multiple doctors for scans, tests, screenings, adjustments, lab work, treatments, and medicines. Regardless of who I consulted, they all had a similar message, and it went something like, "You're one of the healthiest people that comes into this clinic. We don't see anything noteworthy in your tests. This medicine may help your symptoms. Give it a try. Good luck." No one knew quite what to do with all of my unrelated symptoms or how to help. I never felt like they were even listening. As much as I hated to admit it, I needed to see a specialist. After months of patiently waiting for an appointment, I had my first consult with the gut guru, Dr. Y. We hit it off. He laughed at my jokes as he listened to various parts of my body with his cold, shiny stethoscope. Then, after asking a series of questions, he dictated all of my symptoms into the computer. Patient complains of nightly insomnia, often with waking night terrors and vivid hallucinations, daily headaches, occasional debilitating migraines, often with vomiting, daily stomach pain for several years, increasing frequency, diarrhea 3 to 5 times per week, history of asthma, excessive list of food allergies. Multiple allergy tests confirm the list is increasing and intensifying. Frequent neck and shoulder pain, requires regular chiropractic adjustment and electrostimulation. Constantly maintained back pain, poor memory. The patient exhibits clinical findings of audible, heavy stomach fluid movement, pain to pressure in the anterior abdomen and kidney areas. Whoa. It was jarring to hear them all lumped together like that. My mind was racing, clipping through an all too familiar list of harrowing possibilities. There had to be an explanation, and I knew it had to be something serious. I honestly couldn't decide if I wanted to know what it was. I had researched various cancers, tumors, and debilitating diseases, wondering which one afflicted me. Dr. Y told me we needed to proceed with a colonoscopy, more labs, and likely a few biopsies of inflamed areas inside my GI tract. I told him that I was in for whatever we needed to do at any cost. I sat up in my chair and mustered up the courage to ask my burning question. My voice cracked as my mouth suddenly became desert dry. "So, what do you think this is?" Dr. Y turned and situated himself directly in front of me. His change in position and direct eye contact demanded my attention. He knew something, and I was about to know it too. He told me he didn't want to get ahead of himself or the next appointment, but that he had seen cases like mine before. I listened intently, optimistic but terrified. The good doctor went on. I think the problem is that you are very stressed. I sat there, dumbfounded, simultaneously realizing how quiet that clinic was and how loud my mouth breathing had become. I was just about to ask, "Is that all you've got?" when he reiterated his former statement. "I think all of your symptoms are due to stress and anxiety." A brief, awkward pause followed, indicating that it was my turn to speak. "Stress and anxiety," I muttered, as if to say, "You're joking, right?" After all, stress was the vague answer that lazy doctors gave when they couldn't come up with a precise one. I respectfully disagreed and informed him that I didn't feel stressed and anxious. I love my life. I'm not unhappy. I'm grateful for where I am and what I have. I feel like I'm in my prime. Dr. Y interrupted my spiel to inform me that our definitions of stress were different. He said, "Your body is clearly functioning as if under extreme stress." He continued to explain that my system was always in fight or flight mode, even though I wasn't emotionally miserable. He said it was not uncommon for highly productive people, which didn't make me feel any better. Dr. Y projected his opinion in a more convincing way. "Your brain is always active, even when you're trying to sleep. It never rests, does it? People like you just cannot shut it off." He said that he had several patients like me and that some people are just wired that way. He told me that my body was ill because it was exhausted, that I needed to rest both my body and my mind. He informed me that he would proceed in a few weeks with the colonoscopy, but reiterated that he thought the problem was a simple one-word diagnosis. All I could think was, freaking great, now what? I pondered my rebuttal, considering whether he could be right. After all, I was born this way, a dreamer, a doer, a creative, and probably a little ADD too. But those things are not handicaps, they're my superpowers. I naturally have extra energy and require little sleep. An aversion to laziness is in my DNA. These assets are part of my temperament and fit well with what I'm trying to do. After what must have been a significant period of silence, Dr. Y said, "Okay, so we'll do the colonoscopy next and go from there. Good visit." He let me know that a few prescriptions would be waiting for me at the pharmacy. Sarcastically, I replied, "For what, a vacation and a personal assistant?" He explained that one medicine was an antispasmodic to get my stomach to stop churning, and the other was an anti-anxiety medication. I emphatically responded that I was not a medicine guy, especially when it came to mind-altering drugs that could change my state, energy, and engagement. I told him that I didn't want the anxiety stuff, reminding him that I had to function at a high level. Being sedated all day, or worse, becoming dependent on mind-altering drugs was not an option for me. He pushed me to accept a half dose, only at bedtime, for just 30 days. He said it would help me sleep and assured me that I would feel normal each morning after. I reluctantly agreed, planning to figure this stuff out before ever finishing the bottle. With a smirk, the doc asked, "You don't watch TV, do you?" I told him I gave that up many years ago. He recommended that I give myself permission to watch some stand-up comedy videos once in a while in the evenings. I asked him if my joke delivery needed some work, and he said that it would be beneficial to do something enjoyable that didn't involve learning. He added, "Your body needs a signal to know that you're finished working." I informed him that I use red wine to communicate that signal every evening. I drove away from the consult feeling somewhat dejected but slightly relieved too. I hoped the diagnosis was correct, but had desired something more definitive. After all, stress is a wide-ranging, ambiguous foe. Could this massive smattering of long-standing symptoms and issues be a result of anxiety and stress? Seriously? If so, I had faith to know I could come up with a plan to beat it. I'm resilient, persistent, and disciplined, I assured myself. Heck yeah, I can whip this. How did I slip into this mess, like a lazy person with no control? Wait a second. There's no way that it could be this simple. Surely it's a brain tumor or colon cancer. I must at least have some pituitary problems. But what if I don't? That's fantastic. My mind continued to race. Hold it. What about all the other people who are genuinely stressed? What about the people who can't afford to see a specialist? What about people whose marriages are falling apart or who've lost their jobs? What about those who are alone and have no energy? What about people trapped in a much worse place? How bad is their diarrhea? I bet they have constant headaches. There must be millions of those people. What an awful thing. How sad. Is that why so many people take sick days at work? I don't take sick days. There's too much to do. At that moment, the woman at the pharmacy drive-through window said, somewhat aggressively, like she was repeating it for the second time, "Dr. Dallas, your scripts are ready." My stomach rumbled as a familiar abdominal cramp started. How long had I been sitting there? I didn't even remember driving to the place. How many thoughts had just sprinted through my mind? How many more were coming? I immediately tried the spasm medication for my churning stomach. I hadn't even pulled away from the drive-through before opening the bottle. From the window, I noticed a portly, middle-aged woman at the walk-up counter inside. I assumed she was a regular. She had been watching me pop my pills as she waited for her meds. I made eye contact with her just after I swallowed the bitter tablets without any liquid. She quickly looked away, probably thinking about what a hopeless addict I must be. I signed my receipt as the pharmacist informed me that my high-income, low-benefit insurance coverage sucked even more than I thought. The $10,000 deductible and $2,100 per month premiums didn't cover much for stress and loose stools, which only exacerbated my newly diagnosed condition. I took the anxiety medicine that night as directed. The next morning, I felt fine as I poured my first cup of coffee. The gurgling sound of the hot beverage hitting my ceramic mug reminded me of the dream I just had. In it, I was fly fishing beside a familiar waterfall with my annual fishing buddy. This was a significant realization because I had not been able to remember a pleasant dream in years. I rarely dreamed at all. The only ones I remembered were frightening and tense, resulting in me leaping out of bed to fight whatever dangerous situation, demon, or dreadful person had attacked during my fractured slumber. I was always forced to be a frustrated hero in my dreams, springing into action because of other people's negligence, lack of attention, and ignorance. I had already decimated 2 lampshades that year, mistaking them for intruders. My wife was not a big fan of my fictional roles as an action hero while quasi-sleeping. But this day was different. It was a little more peaceful. I noticed that I didn't get nearly as impatient or frustrated with my employees or my children. Before, I had always tried to refrain from showing those emotions, but I knew they were bottled up inside me. I worried that one day the pressure would build so high that I would erupt like a geyser, finally losing it and spraying the inner contents of my mind everywhere with reckless abandon. Thankfully, my level-headed father had taught me some self-control, and I managed to hold it together for another day, score 1 more for the home team. I used the medicine for a few weeks, but only when I felt mentally exhausted or overloaded. My mind was still busy all day, but I seemed to be resting better at night. I arrived early for my colonoscopy appointment after following my pregame instructions. If you've never prepped for such a procedure, let's just say that it's eventful. Your entire GI tract must be emptied, which means everything in there must be flushed out. Everything. There's a uniquely formulated beverage for accomplishing this goal with astounding efficacy. What an adventure. If I ever needed to attack an invading army, I would get mass amounts of that stuff in their water supply ASAP. I stripped down and put on the pastel open-back gown as instructed. A nurse rolled me down the hallway with my IV bag dripping. I had never been on the passenger side of a gurney before. The nurse pressed a button on the wall, exactly like the ones I had pushed to unlock the double doors before witnessing all 5 of my children being born. The next thing I remember, I was in the recovery room next to my wife, Dr. Y, sitting in front of us. It was time for the report. What did the doctor see on the tiny camera that traveled the treacherous path through such a despicable port of entry? What was my condition? What would it mean for my children, my career, my longevity? My wife seemed at ease. What had I missed? What had Dr. Y told her before I came to? Every time I voiced a question, my wife would lightly pat my leg, exactly like I'd seen her do with her 99-year-old great-aunt Tia when she was disoriented. I had many questions, but couldn't get them out. In a foggy stupor, I asked Dr. Y 3 different times if I had hemorrhoids, but that was not what I was trying to ask. I wanted to know if he found a tumor, an ulcer, or a parasitic alien life form. He mostly spoke to my wife. He only occasionally spoke to me as if I were a toddler who just woke up at 3:30 in the morning asking about his missing dragon. I heard her say, "So everything was totally fine?" I lost the audio, but Dr. Y gave an affirmative nod as he mouthed something positive to her. He made tornadic motions over his head, followed by side-to-side hand movements in front of his stomach with a sour face. The next time I woke up, we were entering our neighborhood. I was emotional, but in a good way. I was grateful to know that I wasn't dying. I told my wife I felt fine and planned to mow the grass and jump on the trampoline with the kids. A few hours later, I woke again in my bedroom. There was no noise in the house, which was remarkable. I walked into the kitchen to find a beautiful woman preparing a plate of food. She had quarantined all the kids to the yard. She hugged me, then pulled out my chair and said, "Dr. Y said you did great. Everything's fine. He said it's just stress because you're such a machine." With firm resolve, I promised her I would figure this stuff out and get better. "I know you will," she said, and pushed my plate toward me. That night, I ordered 3 books on gut health, neurology, and psychology. I also ordered the first of many test kits to start measuring vitamins, minerals, essential elements, hormones, markers, enzymes, heavy metals, toxins, yeast, bacteria, metabolites, antioxidants, and anything else I could to obtain useful data. It was time to take a deep dive into what was happening inside my body and determine what sustainable solutions were out there for remedies. I planned to test as many methods as possible until I found a few that worked. I had no idea that I would eventually test dozens, if not hundreds, of products and practices over the next 2 years. I didn't want to base my results merely on how I felt. I wanted accurate, tangible data. For the next few months, the family became accustomed to regularly finding urine sample containers next to the veggies in the freezer. Blood, saliva, and hair samples became commonplace as well. It was time for me to figure it all out and beat this thing. A new dawn. In the early stages of my recovery, I naively thought my condition was unique, ignorant of the fact that many of the successful people around me were in similar situations. Evidently, people don't talk about these things too openly. I don't know if it's that we're embarrassed or just too busy to take time to share. Maybe it's a simple lack of community and connection. Regardless, I took the road alone, without a guide or mentor. I didn't know anyone who was in the same boat, much less someone who had successfully made it out of the storm. So, I just planned to do the only thing I truly knew how to do: launch and then learn how to fly and make adjustments as I went. What ensued was a whirlwind journey of recovery, rebuilding, and rebirth. If you had told me how dramatically things would improve, I would have been a skeptic. I'm conscious that I have an addictive personality, so I wasn't surprised when the 3 books turned into several dozen more. The reading compounded with hundreds of hours of training courses, podcasts, and educational videos. I was hungry for improvement and expected to find some. What I did not expect was that I would totally redesign my life, one element at a time. Progress became my drug of choice, and it was in abundant supply. I was clueless about the possibilities that were available, accessible, and free to all of us. I assumed that a modest 5 to 10% improvement in overall health, wellness, and happiness was possible. Going 3 days without a pounding headache or speed walking to the bathroom would have been amazing. Small adjustments started having big effects as each element seemed to build on the next with exponential and synergistic effects. The ongoing lab results mirrored what I was feeling in real time. My high cortisol, stress hormone, level dropped, as my low serotonin and dopamine, happy hormones, levels rose. I started getting high on life. My brain chemistry changed, and so did everything else. The numerous deficiencies noted in my prior reports began disappearing. My relationships improved. Over time, my mind became sharper, more attuned, and less distracted. I learned how to be less triggered, more fulfilled, and to experience true peace. I learned how to rest in body, mind, and spirit. The way I saw the world and my role in it shifted. The way I connected with people elevated. My sense of fulfillment and satisfaction improved, and the fear and feeling of entrapment I had been wrestling with diminished. I realized retrospectively that many overachievers have a false sense of security when it comes to health and happiness. I certainly did. We inaccurately believe that life is good enough, or at least as good as it can reasonably get. We make excuses for our lousy condition and justify staying there. The real problem is that our standards are too low and our vision is lacking. We're not broken. We're just a little too normal. We're stuck in the middle, but fail to realize it because we're doing noticeably better than most. The problem is that we genuinely have no idea of what lies outside the mediocrity. We don't even question the possibilities because we're ignorant of them. Our measuring scale is inadequate. We compare our lives to those of sick people, not the people who are thriving. I was one of the healthiest and happiest people I knew, but only because I measured myself within the median range of sick, unhappy, stressed, depressed, angry, broke, bored, unfulfilled folks. I'm now functioning as an anomaly, several standard deviations away from the mean. I thought only monks and mystics could exist in this realm. Why this book? Why now? I started helping a few people. They call it coaching now, after vetting these powerful practices myself. I never intended to. It happened organically. I don't know why they decided to come to me instead of someone else, or how they found me, but they did. Many of them already had doctors, therapists, pastors, counselors, or coaches. Before I knew it, friends, family, and total strangers were coming out of the woodwork. Without warning, people would get comfortable and unload on me. It was uncanny. They would share things they had never shared with anyone. There was some positive change cooking in the kitchen, and once people smelled it, they became hungry. Once I started sharing the insights and strategies now contained in this book, other people started changing too. People were working out their rocky marriage, returning to lead their families, getting off antidepressants, eliminating long-standing debt, receiving promotions at work, losing weight, feeling stronger and more energetic, developing courage, dating again, loving and being loved, becoming more charitable, simplifying, finding peace, and building an entirely different future. Every person I was able to share the feast with wanted to bring more people to the banquet. I love the one-on-one approach, but there's only one of me. Even with massive amounts of new margin appearing on my schedule from Simplifying Life, I could not service all the requests for help. But I also believed it would be selfish not to share. Suddenly, writing this book felt necessary. But here's the disclaimer. This book isn't for everyone. I'm not such a dreamer as to think that this material is for every person who picks it up. It's not. This manual is for proven doers. It's for people who sincerely hunger for growth and don't require extra external motivation every day to do demanding work. Most people have goals, but the majority don't attain those goals. What most people do get is their standards. The 3-word simple takeaway from this book may be raise your standards. Better standards require us to remove some things and to add some others. They force us to accept some things and refuse to accept others. At this point in life, you don't need another lecture. You probably only need a few new tools, and perhaps a quick demo. Beyond desire and hunger, this book is for people who have already been through a few of the natural stages for highly productive people. Failure comes first, likely many times. Success hopefully arrives next, and then comes the stuff in this book. I say this because people who have not been through the first 2 stages, failure and success, will not be ready. Success doesn't teach us much, but it does give us confidence that we can do it again. Failure, suffering, and setbacks are typically the place where we experience the most learning and growth. Without a certain amount of resilience, humility, discipline, and honesty, this stuff can't work. Those traits prepare fertile ground for new growth, so when seeds blow by, they have a chance to sprout. The plan. All of these methods will require practice and repetition. The elements that have the most value and impact will require the most effort. However, the dividends from the investment will keep paying out for years to come. You will live a more abundant life. The awesome thing I'm discovering about this process is that living a healthier, more fulfilled, more peaceful, and more playful life actually takes less work than living the way I was living before. It's a rare opportunity in life to be offered an upgrade for a lower price. Don't pass it up. The overused phrase, work smarter, not harder, certainly applies. I began experiencing this material as a curious novice on a meandering path. You don't have to be as lost as I was, although I am grateful for the process as I experienced it. I have developed a sequence for you based on well-vetted practices and verified results. There's no way that you can implement this stuff and not improve. No way. You will experience events, people, and processes in a more vibrant, more connected way. You will have the tools that you need to change any situation, any mood, and any outcome. You will look differently, speak differently, and see differently. You will be less angry, triggered, and envious. You will be more confident, grounded, and consistent. You will have a clearer path and a sharper focus. People will gravitate towards you as you genuinely enjoy life more. You will experience more order and freedom. Your human connections will deepen. You will understand why you do what you do, and in turn, why other people do what they do. You'll be able to remove wasteful objects, tasks, and people from your life. You will change the way you work and your relationships with money. You will rediscover what it feels like to be a child at heart. My promise to you is that I will not waste your time. I know it's valuable. We will move quickly and intentionally. I'm grateful that we're both here now, and your attention honors me. I'm pumped, knowing that you are about to climb onto the rocket ship and launch to a new place. Trust the process. Follow the script. This ride has the real potential to change everything. A side note. In reviewing my overstuffed journal to write this book, I now have a better understanding of a point explained by Carl Jung. He said that the greatest and most important problems of life are all, in some sense, insoluble. They cannot be solved, but only outgrown. E.F. Schumacher said it a bit differently, but he parallels Jung by saying, quote, "Divergent problems cannot be killed. They can, however, be transcended," end quote. This is only the case, quote, "where self-awareness plays its proper role," end quote. Thanks to good fortune, or what the religious call grace, I do feel like many of my problems were gifts. They're opportunities, and continue to be. As strange as it may sound, I think the verb transcended more accurately describes this process. Whether outgrown or transcended, my problems were not solved as much as they were left behind during a period of maturation. About halfway through this manuscript, when you hit your stride, there'll be an opportunity for your deeper, more genuine self to awaken to. This part of you has always been there, and it is good. Now might be the time to stretch it out and let it breathe. I sincerely hope so, because you are too good to feel this bad.